Okay, day 3. I was slightly anxious this morning, laying in bed, listening to the rain hammering on the skylight, but it seems to have rained itself through, and we've got some nice blue skies. It's 8 degrees. I may have put too many layers on today, but if the sun stays out, but it looks like it'll be okay. So I'm just leaving Louisville in rush hour by the looks of it. Gott in Himmel. So Alsfeld is a beautiful town. I went there last night for something to eat with Sebastian from SWRTech, who lives in the village, and it's been voted, I think, one of Germany's most beautiful villages in the past. It's a really cool sort of medieval place, little small streets, old buildings, you know, dating from the 14th, 15th century. I would have liked to have taken you there today to have a look around, but today, day 3, is really a slog to get across to the Polish border. So I'm leaving here and heading to Markersdorf, so I think it's going to be a big motorway slog. But given the weather, I'm going to make as much progress as I can in the not rain. But today was just always going to be one of those days, just to not necessarily sightsee, but just steam across eastern Germany. So I'm back on the Autobahn now, and although the roads are damp, thankfully there's not the standing water that I encountered on day 1. And yesterday, when I first got into Germany, I was getting slightly confused because my sat-nav shows my speed that I'm allowed to do, and it wasn't showing the speed, and I was a little bit confused. I was trying to work out how fast I can go, and then I realised obviously there is no speed limit on the Autobahn. They have an advisory 130 kilometers an hour, but that's it. And, but most people seem to do it well. As Jürgen, my host at the last B&B, said, the only people that go really fast down the outside lane are businessmen, because they're not paying for the gas, which is probably a good point. But lane discipline is very good here as well. People get out, they overtake, they get back in. Nobody dawdles around in the outside lane. If I was on the M11 on the way home, there'd be a queue of traffic in that lane, not going really anywhere particularly very fast. Well, pretty grotty conditions. It's kind of, I don't think it's really raining very much. More of this is spray, so but I'm going to need some fuel soon. So the next service station I'm going to stop, fill up, get a cup of coffee, and then potentially look at a route off of the motorway. Blue sky at last.
It's a lovely little site with I think 20 cabins in total. Really quiet. It's in the middle of nowhere, to be honest. I did film some stuff showing you around the cabin, but unfortunately where my GoPro got wet, I lost that footage through a corrupted card, so this is all I have.
Bye bye nature park. Gonna get some breakfast on the way, but hopefully if we have a day like this it'll be lovely. As I say, 6 degrees, so a bit chilly, but I'll be fine. I thought it's probably worth talking a little bit about my father on this journey. He did his training in Manchester with the site which is now Manchester Airport, so he did all of his basic training there and then was shipped off to North Africa. It all gets a bit hazy there in terms of his records. I don't know exactly what it is he was doing in North Africa. I think possibly just further training and acclimatisation before taking part in Operation Fustian, which was a mission to capture a bridge, Primasole Bridge, on the island of Sicily. And quite famously it's a mission that went horribly wrong, a combination of logistics and weather. The jump got scattered, so of the troops that were jumping, I think only 10% or something like that hit the drop zone. The rest was scattered all over the place, some as far away as Mount Etna. One of the stories my father told me in later life is that his plane did get shot at by anti-aircraft fire. So obviously they're on static lines, so they're all on a line, everybody lines up and they jump, 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 jump. The two guys in front of him were critically injured or dead, so for him to get out of the plane, well, he still had the chance. He had to pull his knife out, cut through their webbing and make the jump. He then landed nowhere near the drop site, and unfortunately as he was landing, the enemy troops were waiting for him. He got transported to Genoa, then shipped across in cattle trucks to Poland, where he spent 2 years at Lambsdorff. There is another site that shows up on his prisoner of war records, but I think that was kind of basically a holding site in Germany where they put the guys until they could ship them home. And then when I discovered that this site is still here, I had to go and pay a visit. It was something that I needed to do, and I talked about doing it for a long time, and then for one day I just said, why the hell don't I just jump on the bike and go? And this is the result. So hopefully I don't get stuck behind this truck all the way, but I'm looking forward to this. I don't really know what to expect, but we'll see. Anyway, onwards. I didn't notice anything on the road, but I've just had a message from EE to say while you're in Poland you'll pay £1.66 a day. So I would guess I'm in Poland. I have to say though, this A4 Autobahn or motorway or whatever they call it now, we're in Poland, is very good. It's very quiet as well, which I wasn't expecting. This is quite a good sign. I saw this sign earlier on, so it shows you the outside temperature and the temperature of the road, which is pretty flash. Well, this is a bit more like it weather-wise. I'm nowhere glamorous. McDonald's for breakfast, but I didn't eat properly last night, and on the run in this morning I just needed a drink and something to eat, so I just had a McFarmer's, which is turns out to be a sausage and egg McMuffin without the egg. Fingers crossed. This continues now well, for the rest of the trip, but there you go. So I'm about 90 kilometers from the prisoner of war camp, so by the time I leave here I should get there kind of 11, 12 o'clock-ish, something like that, which gives me the whole afternoon to spend there. At least it's not raining, and it hasn't rained, and that's been the journey here, although a bit of a slog on the motorway, has been lovely, just not getting wet. That plug. I'm going to finish off my coffee, say hello to some of my little friends down here that I've made since appearing with food. It's a little bit camera shy, so I'm going to finish my coffee and then get back on the road. There is a toll. It's an e-toll. Okay, don't know how that's going to work. I'm just going to have a little bit of a fanfare here because hopefully you can see it because I've moved this out of the way, but I'm just about to clock up 1,000 miles on the trip so far. Boom, and there it is, 1,000 miles. Let's just go and ask these nice policemen. Hi. Do you speak English? Do you speak English?
Yes.
Can I pay? Do I pay my toll here or do I do it online?
This goes only in oil station. You must buy a billet.
A billet. So I do that online.
Remember Opole Zachód.
Opole Zachód. Okay.
And road Opole Zachód.
Okay.
Maybe you have an application, but it's not easy. Application, but
okay.
I think bus oil station is
the best way.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much. I didn't know how I was going to feel about coming here, and it's been a thing that's been, knowing it's here and something that's been kind of with me all my life. I'm starting to get a bit of a lump in my throat as well. I've not even got to the museum yet, just being in this area. Well, that's the first poignant sight. And so this is the museum.
In the years when the wars were fought, Lambsdorff was a destination for cattle car trains filled up with prisoners of war of different nationalities. It was here that colonies were formed to move to the camps located a few kilometers away. Also, in times of peace, after each of the global conflicts, Lambsdorff and Lambinowice was a place where civilians were detained. Today, to get to know the history of this place, tourists visit it.
So you have to excuse the poor lighting. I left my little light outside on the bike, but Dominic, who's the manager here, has just been talking through some bits and pieces with me and showing me around. So I've watched that video which introduces everything, and then this is the exhibition, or there's 4 exhibitions in total here. There's 2 on either side of this room. One is looking at the Stalag, which was the privates and non-commissioned officers, and then there's one on the other side which shows the accommodation, and the accommodation shows the camp and everything for the officers. So obviously my father was a private, so this is where I'm going to start looking around, and I'll try to capture this, but it is a little bit different. Sorry, it's a little bit difficult to do that, but there's lots of
great examples of stuff here. So that's just straw and hessian, and I think you were lucky to get that. One of the big problems they did have here was food. The rations were really poor. I think the guy's got a kind of an inch thick, 6-inch square piece of bread, and that was about it. So a lot of prisoners essentially starved to death. So as ill-treated as they were, or as poor as the conditions were, actually the British soldiers and the American soldiers were looked after better than the Russians. The Russians really suffered.
The conditions of accommodation, board, work and medical care, as well as the camp regime, are not the same to all in turn, though. Their belonging to individual armies and nationalities are of the decisive importance. British, American, French or Belgian soldiers are treated in a much better manner than those from Central Eastern Europe. The harshest treatment is applied by Germans towards soldiers of the Red Army, who basically, as the only ones, are all placed in stalags, irrespective of their army ranks. Hunger, work beyond capacity, lack of medical care and brutal treatment caused the camps to become places of their extermination. The most important activity of the day in prisoner of war camps is eating. Hunger harasses everybody. Still, due to the differences in being treated by Germans, not to the same extent. The size and quality of food rations are determined by special directives, which are then verified by the economic situation of the Third Reich, subject to change during the war. Therefore, the place of forced labour is of a great importance. Prisoners of war employed in agriculture can count on additional food. Food packets sent in by families, acquaintances and charities are considerable help to all, again, with the exception of Soviet prisoners of war. The content of the packages differs. For instance, those from the occupied Poland are poor, whereas those from Britain or America contain even coffee and chocolate. So that the food sent into the camp could be managed in the best way, prisoners of war form 2 to 5 person groups, the so-called food partnerships. Thanks to that, they can eat more often and more varied meals. They have to prepare meals themselves and often construct primitive cookers to do so. The hygienic, sanitary conditions in most of the camps are bad. Water is in dire need for cleaning and washing. Neither are there soap and towels. Sporadic visits to camp baths turn out to be another occasion to be persecuted. And the straw or wooden shavings and mattresses or clothes that are disinfected only too rarely often change into the site of worms. Fleas and bugs are a plague with which prisoners of war constantly fight in vain. In a stalag, Germans can detain some dozen thousand soldiers from different parts of the world, representatives of many nations, cultures and religions. Constrained, crammed into a small space, cut off from the rest of the world with barbed wire, they share their common suffering and distress.
So this is a scale model of the camp, and we are a little bit further down the road from here, but on the way in you would have seen the cemetery, which is here. Then there's this road here, which I think is what's known as Chestnut Avenue, and that was the main entrance into the camp. And this is where the British soldiers were, so that's one area I'm going to go back to go down that. I think I'm going to walk, I can ride down there, but I'm going to walk down some of that path because there's a pretty good chance that I'll be following the footsteps of my father there. But yeah, you can just see the scale of this camp. And interestingly, Dominic showed me something which I'll show you now. That's an embroidered handkerchief, and I have one like that which my father has, and we don't know. I've not been able to track down whether it was made and sent to him from outside or whether it was made in the camp. But yeah, I have something like that, so I'm going to show that. Well, I didn't bring it with me, but I'm going to send a photograph to the museum for them to have a look at it. And if it's of interest, I think I might donate it to them. I know that it is something that my father had, but I think I would much rather have it here, where more people can see it. But yeah, there's a lot of information to take in, so I'm going to have a look around. Well, you never know, my father may well be in that picture. That's pretty harrowing stuff, really, because although obviously you, as a prisoner of war camp, things are going to be tough, you have to remember that this was also used as an extermination camp, and a lot of people just died through starvation and overwork or not following orders, and they would be shot there, so pretty horrendous. And I think at the moment I'm just not able to take it all in. And this bit here is talking about the evacuation of the camp. So in January 1945, as the Russian army were pushing on, the Germans tried to move all of the prisoners out, and this is what was known as the Death March, or the Big March, where they basically, in the middle of January, snowy conditions, took the prisoners out and forced them to walk towards Germany. And my father was part of that. He survived it, obviously. But that's one of the few things that he did talk to me about. I remember as a kid, and it's easy to look back on it and you say, oh, I was starving, I'm so hungry. You know, I come in from school and I go, oh, Dad, I'm starving, I want something to eat. And if he was in a particularly bad mood, he would say, you don't know what starving is. And as a kid, you'd just go, yeah, fine, yeah, okay, whatever. But it was only that I realised that he said to me, if you ever need to push a pig away from its food trough to eat what it's going to eat, then you're starving. So yeah, he had a tough old time, and he was a tough guy. But well, I'm going to continue wandering around, and I'll come back to you a bit later on. So that was interesting. I'm not quite sure how I feel at the moment. I do feel emotional. I think it probably hit me more when I get down to the site, because this is obviously a museum which is much like any other museum, but and actually there's a lot more to this camp than I ever knew. Obviously I knew about its operation in World War II, but it was also a prisoner of war camp for World War I, and then there's a much less known, talked about issue after the war, where it became a civilian camp for the displaced population. So obviously Poland lost some of its eastern border to Russia, which is now the Ukraine, and this part was originally Germany, but sort of post the war was given to Poland. And so there was displaced communities which were moved around, and this became a holding camp for those civilians, but that in turn was turned into a labour camp, a forced labour camp. And I've heard some pretty harrowing stories of the women from that camp having to exhume the bodies of the some 30,000 Russian soldiers that were executed here. Exhuming them from mass graves with no masks, no protective gear. They in turn contracted typhus, took that back into the camp, and another 1,000 to 1,500 people died in that. Civilians, women and children and older people. And this was after the war had finished, when you'd think this place was no longer causing despair. But yeah, interesting place, quite moving. But I'm going to now go to, there's some remains of another camp which wasn't the camp where my father was, that's down the road. So I'm going to go there, then I'm going to go back to the cemetery, and next to the cemetery is the main entrance road, which doesn't really go anywhere, but I'm going to go and step down that, because I imagine it's a place where my father stepped. So definitely worth making the trip here for sure.
I'm just heading back towards the museum now, and I'm going to turn left and go to the cemetery and what they refer to as, I think, Chestnut Avenue. We go from the dirt back onto one of the original cobbled roads. So this at one point would have been the main road into the camp. The buildings to the right were the camp commander's house. Would have been over there somewhere, and to the left were German barracks. And then up here on the right hand side was where the British soldiers would have been. Seems like as good a spot as any to stop. Apparently there's wild boar in the forest, so if you don't see me again, that's what's happened to me. But then you wouldn't be seeing this video, would you? So from what I can make out on the map, this is where the wooden barracks for the British soldiers would have been. There's obviously evidence of it there. We've got what looks like a loading platform. And there's a hard standing there as well. So I guess I am treading the ground where my father once did. Poor old Bill, he had a bit of a tough time of it. Which probably explains why he was such a tough guy. Hard as nails. Small, but determined. And yeah, I'm so pleased that I've made it here now. I just wish he was still around so I could give him a hug and tell him that I've been here. It's so quiet as well. Really quiet. Fitting. I can hear movement in the undergrowth over there. Am I about to capture a wild boar attack live on video? So back that way is the road coming into the camp. It continues in that direction. I'm going to go down there and see what it is, but there's a pretty good chance, well, for sure I know my dad would have come down here at some point, either in the back of a truck or when they started the march he would have walked out down here. So I think I'm going to have a couple of minutes just to sit in the quiet and have a think to my dad. I should have brought something I could toast him to, but a bit like me, he wasn't really much of a drinker either. So yeah, I'm going to spend a bit of time here, so I'll catch up with you when I'm on my route to the next venue. And this is the cemetery where the not so lucky ones were. But as I've discovered, this a lot of this dates back to the First World War, so there are World War One. I think the majority of these are World War One graves. Yeah, 1917, 1917. So lots of Romanian flags. Whenever you come to places like this, it's just such a waste of life, just for somebody who's got big ideas about something. It's crazy. I never understand human beings in that respect. Anyway, back to the bike, and I'm now off to Nysa, which is where my accommodation is for this evening. I'm hot and sweaty now, because which is a good thing to be, but I've been wandering around in this riding gear, and the temperature has definitely picked up from where it was previously. So let's go.
It was shortly after this that my GoPro froze for the umpteenth time, and I decided I just couldn't be bothered to deal with it anymore. So I've got no footage of me riding into Nysa, but we'll pick up me leaving that town and heading to the Czech Republic in the next episode.